Hey everyone, welcome to the Eat to Win show where sports nutrition meets peak performance. Get ready for expert insights, real stories, and tips to help you win with every meal. Let's dive in.
All right, welcome to the Winner's Circle in the Eat to Win podcast show. I'm your host, Tavis Piatoli, and we're here to talk about all things related to sports nutrition and how we help athletes win. Today, we have a true pioneer in the field, Bob Seebohar. He is the creator of Nutrition Periodization, Metabolic Efficiency Training, worked with elite, young, masters athletes to optimize fueling strategies. Whether you're an endurance athlete or sports dietitian looking to level up, this episode is packed with insights. Bob, thank you so much for being here. As always, I know we've known each other a long time, but this is always going to be, it's always fun to chat and just talk nutrition and just really talk education.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor to be in the winning circle today.
So I know this probably sounds like it makes us feel old, but you've been a leader in sports nutrition for 25 plus years, right?
My gosh.
I'm like, oh my gosh, you think about that going, oh man, I feel like I was just a kid in college and like, where did those 25
Yeah.
years go? But let's kind of go back to really what got you into this field. What originally inspired you to create, not only become a dietitian, but to create nutrition periodization, metabolic efficiency training?
Yeah, I mean, I won't be too long-winded on the career thing. I had no idea what I wanted to do, to be honest with you. Like, I started my undergrad in exercise science. I thought I was going to become a physical therapist. And seriously, only because I've been an athlete my whole life. I grew up an athlete and I figured, oh, well, maybe I'll do something with that. It really wasn't, to be honest with you, it wasn't until I started endurance events and triathlon specifically halfway through my undergrad. And I failed so miserably at sprint distance triathlon because I grew up a team sport athlete, soccer, basketball. Failing miserably led me to my sport nutrition career because I wanted to understand more about it. And when I say failing miserably, not just in the sport itself, but in I had so much GI distress moving from team sport to like more anaerobic based to aerobic. So that's what drove me. I mean, and then obviously I love working with athletes, but then kind of fast forwarding into nutrition periodization and metabolic efficiency training early in my dietitian career, literally like in the first 6 to 9 months, I realized that because also, in addition to me being a sport dietitian, I'm also a physiologist, an endurance coach, and a strength and conditioning professional. And what I was realizing that nobody was talking the same language with athletes. Like it was all these side conversations. So when I would talk to athletes about their training cycle, which coaches do all the time, they didn't know. And then I would have to talk to the coach and vice versa. It was so convoluted and so complicated. I'm like we know what physical periodization was back then. And then I was like, oh, maybe Mr. Smarty Pants can just kind of put nutrition in there. And now we can actually talk about periodization as an overall physical and nutritional. So that was the birth of nutrition periodization. That was, in my mind, that was the no duh, well, yeah, of course we should do this, right? The metabolic efficiency training actually came kind of as a byproduct, again, of my GI distress for doing endurance events. And that's about the time early 2000s when I started doing more Ironman triathlons and having even more GI distress. And then I was counseling a lot of endurance athletes, same thing. And I'm sure you heard the same thing in school. People were just my professors were just saying, oh, that's par for course. If you do endurance events, you're going to have GI distress. I'm like, no, you don't understand. That's not, it's painful. It's not. So I kind of set out to discover the why behind GI distress and if I could fix it. And that it just led me down the path to this whole metabolic efficiency training concept. So it was born out of GI distress and to eliminate that, but it's morphed into improving health markers, improving even some longevity patterns. And honestly, I use it for anyone who is younger to older. It does not matter who it is. So that's kind of a brief background of.
All right, so let's talk, and thanks for kind of explaining that. Let's talk about nutrition periodization first. First, can you explain the concept of it, and then how does it benefit different types of athletes?
Yeah. So the basic concept is you want to support the physical training load changes. So when I say training load, that is a byproduct of training volume times training intensity. So as training volume and intensity go up or down, nutrition in terms of macros and micronutrients, those should fluctuate to support the physical needs of the body and the brain. Right. So based on, for a traditional, team sport athlete, we look at preseason, in season, and off season. Right. So each season, and even within a season, have different nutritional goals because there are different physical goals. So how does that benefit athletes? Well, if you match your body and your brain's energy needs with the capacity or the energy expenditure from physical training, you'll actually match them better so you can support not only athletic performance or improving performance, but also you can improve recovery times, you can improve sleep habits, and you can improve cognitive functioning. So it seems pretty easy, right? Like, oh, of course, you should just align your eating and hydration strategies with your training. But people haven't thought about that, right? And they still continue not to as much. I mean, it's coming along nicely these days, but it's still not where it should be.
Yeah. And I guess what you're trying to say is the more you do, right? It's like driving the car. If I'm going to drive it from here to Miami, I need more gas. So on those days I go longer, I need more fuel. On the days I train longer. And that's for maybe younger individuals listening. They might not realize, all right, well, they probably just eat the same thing every day. They don't think, all right, well, if I burn 5,000 calories, I probably should be eating 5 versus eating 2. And that's kind of like, so how do you recommend athletes adjust their nutrition in different places, like, or different phases of training, like base?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, just like you were mentioning, you're hinting at, is when the volume changes. That's my biggest limiter, right? When your volume increases, like let's take an NCAA athlete, like Division I, right? There are times of the year where they are restricted at 8 hours of training per week from NCAA standards, and then 20 hours, right? So when I'm working with my college athletes, the first thing I need to know is what stage are you in? Are you in that 8 hour or 20 hour? Because major nutrition change, I mean, that's more of a double change in volume. That is a major change in nutrition. But it could be as easy like when I'm working with endurance athletes. Maybe an endurance athlete is training 10 hours this week and 12 next week. It doesn't seem like a big change, but maybe they're doing more speed work, right? So we also look at the intensity of training, because the intensity of training will actually break down the body a little bit faster and need some different strategies, nutrition strategies along with that. So looking at overall volume, but also the intensity within the volume, those are the key markers, like the aha moment, the proverbial light bulb to say, maybe I should step back a little bit and look at changing my nutrition and hydration strategies.
Excellent. Yeah. I mean, I guess on those, when you say that, when you mention macros, they're changing obviously on higher volume. They're doing more carbs, lower volume, less carbs, things like that.
Right, right, exactly. And there are some pretty wonky things going on right now, as you know, with a lot of different topics. That's another podcast all in itself. But yeah, on the basic level, we're really looking. I mean, usually I don't periodize protein too much because I like to. That's actually my first step with athletes, is I like to get it where it should be, and then we time it correctly, especially around strength training. But that is pretty stable, right? I really like to periodize the carbohydrates and the fat because I kind of think of it as like a teeter-totter, right? The fulcrum, the base is protein. That doesn't really move too much once you have it where it should be. What really moves based on training cycle and needs and goals is the two ends of the teeter-totter, right? Fat goes up, carbohydrates go down, and vice versa.
Excellent. All right, let's shift a little bit into the metabolic efficiency side of things. It's one of your signature concepts. What is it? Why should it be so crucial, especially for maybe like an endurance athlete?
My gosh. Well, I initially listened. I mean, when I developed this and created this, I was an endurance athlete, still am. I thought it was only for endurance athletes, but then I got smart. We're not really that smart when we're young. I mean, you kind of feel the same way, right? I mean,
100%.
wow, we are so much more knowledgeable now. Anyway, I thought it was like, oh, this is great. This is only for endurance athletes. But I'm like, as I've been using it, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's really for everybody. But yes, it is probably a little more specific, let's say, to endurance athletes, only because if we're classifying endurance athletes with just training volume, they are typically going a little bit longer duration at one time, right? It's not like a basketball practice that might last 2 or 3 hours. It's a lot of stop and go, sitting on the bench, right? They might be going for 3 to 5 hours, right? At continuous effort. So that aside, metabolic efficiency training, very simply put, is literally periodizing carbohydrate, protein, and fat to optimize blood sugar to support physical training and health goals. That is, like, in a nutshell, we are just looking at how to structure the macronutrients to support blood sugar control. And that's the whole focus of metabolic efficiency training, is optimizing blood sugar.
So what are some practical ways athletes can improve their metabolic efficiency without compromising their performance?
Super easy. I mean, honestly, like, I've got this system that I do. I mean, honestly, if you look at what's the first step you should take, look in the mirror, or maybe not in the mirror, look in the refrigerator, pantry, and look for protein sources, right? Because this is where I start. I feel like most of the athletes I've worked with are deficient in protein, right? I will classify different categories of athletes, but endurance athletes are traditionally known for being extremely protein deficient. Protein itself is very, very important when it comes to the regulation and optimization of blood sugar. So that's why I like to start there. And I always explain it's not that protein is more important than carbohydrates or fat. It's that protein is mostly deficient, and it's usually underutilized because people don't understand the importance of it. So look at protein first, make sure you've got that fulcrum, right? That has to be, and of course there are different amounts for different athletes and different ages, but that is the first and foremost. Then we look at the kind of the spillover effect and how to periodize carbohydrates and fat with that. But I tell you what, like an easy example, I've got a lot of simplistic models that I use with athletes. If just at the very beginning, if athletes can just look at the size of their hand and none of this like palm of your hand deck of cards kind of thing like we learned 20 years ago, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about wrist to fingertips. That's one serving of an animal-based protein. So if you're going to eat a piece of fish or chicken or steak or hamburger or something like that, if you can get close to that handful of protein, you will be in a very good starting place to optimize your blood sugar. Then we just need to add the fruits and veggies, the whole grains and starches, maybe looking at different types of fat sources if an athlete is vegetarian versus vegan versus omnivore. So there are a lot of downstream efforts after that.
All right, stay with us as we take a short break to thank our sponsors. You're listening to the Eat to Win podcast with your host, Tavis Piatoli.
Liquid Fuel is a new sports and hydration product formulated by a sports dietitian to give athletes the edge to train and compete longer. It contains the low glycemic carbohydrate platinose, designed to keep blood sugar levels more stable to provide energy for 3 to 4 hours without the blood sugar crash seen in other leading sports drinks. Its unique 4-part electrolyte formula includes 50% of your daily magnesium need to optimize muscle function. Liquid Fuel is naturally sweetened, along with no artificial ingredients or colors. Currently being used by high school, collegiate, and professional teams, Liquid Fuel allows you to live life with the confidence knowing you're properly fueling your body. Visit drinkliquidfuel.com and use the code MSD10 to get 10% off your offer.
Welcome back to the Eat to Win podcast, where we're talking with Bob Seebohar and Nutrition Periodization and Metabolic Efficiency. Let's dive back in. We're going to shift now to kind of talking about young and also masters athletes, right? There's probably two different age groups, young athletes and then older adults that still want to perform and compete and do different things. Young athletes obviously have different nutritional needs, but what are some of the biggest mistakes we see parents and coaches make when we talk about fueling young athletes?
Well, first and foremost, I want to say that they think that their young athlete is an adult athlete. No, that's the first and foremost. And like, I'm a parent myself, and listen, it's difficult because everything you hear is from the adult landscape in terms of nutrition, right? So parents are trying to do their best, but they're just getting the wrong information, right? Because they're just kind of filtering. So yeah, the first thing, just like you said, young athletes, like we need to remember, like they're going through different Tanner stages during puberty, right? There's 5 different Tanner stages. We need to respect the fact that they are developing still. So I've actually had a lot, like I still promote my metabolic efficiency training with young athletes, but there are different periodization guidelines for younger athletes. They do need usually much more carbohydrates or many more carbohydrates than us based on their developmental level, be it pre-puberty, puberty, or post-puberty. But that's probably the biggest mistake I see, Tavis, is parents just are not understanding that there are different guidelines for adults versus kids.
Yeah, I know we're not going to get into it, but just the amount of influencers with kids looking at social media. It's like my daughter, particularly, and I don't want to get too long on this, is she's asking about energy drinks and certain brands that girls are drinking and stuff. And I'm like, she knows my stance, but she's going to try to ask some questions and say, are there ones that I can have? So anyway.
Which is actually good that she's asking, like she's having that conversation.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. It's not just going behind my back saying, hey, I'm getting that. Now, you talked about the young on the other spectrum, masters athletes. How do we need to help masters athletes kind of adapt their nutrition and performance for the longevity of this?
Oh my gosh, this is near and dear to my heart because I, of course, am a master's athlete too. But looking, like I did a deep dive into this research years ago because obviously, you know, as I'm developing and aging too, I'm like, I want to learn more about this. There are so many biological challenges because there are so many biological changes when it comes to aging. Masters athletes, like we are basically stuck with the knowledge that we have had for the past, let's say 10, 20, 30, 40 years of competing in whatever sport. We're trying to bring that knowledge into our master's years and it doesn't work. There are so many more inefficiencies that we have from eating calories to absorbing micronutrients to hydration, to even just managing core temperature. It's amazing. So it's not a full-on nutrition shift for masters athletes, but just recognizing there are significant biological changes. I mean, we always joke with this, you can't, sorry, if you're 50 years old, you're not going to go back to your 20 or 30-year-old self in physical or nutritional. But a lot of people are starting to understand, okay, I can't get there physically, but they're still eating the same. And what's the first thing that I actually hear with masters athletes is, hey, I can't get rid of my belly fat. I can't get rid of the fat around my hips and my waist. Like, what's going on? It is literally, I mean, obviously there are hormonal changes. So if you flip it, right, there are hormonal changes with the young athletes, because that's when they're getting into their female and male hormones. And then when we get to, our age, it's like now those things are significantly decreasing. So we've got kind of the cards dealt against us. So there are some pretty significant nutrition changes. And I just like the first thing I teach my masters athletes is just the awareness of what happens with your body. And maybe it doesn't happen to every masters athlete, but we need to be aware that there could be these changes and to prepare for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you said, hormonal metabolism. I don't think a lot of people realize they're not burning as many calories at rest at 50 as they are at 20.
Yeah.
I was plugging some numbers in earlier, just playing around with some stuff. And I'm like, same height, weight for an individual. And if you take 30 years off, it's like a 300 or 400 calorie difference at rest that you're burning.
Which is
that many
significant.
Less. It's like that might sound like, 300 calories. But if you add that up every day, that's 15, 2,000 a week. That over the course of a year, that's many pounds that you can gain. It's like when you go to the reunion and you look at those pictures and they're like, I look so much different 20 years ago. What
exactly.
happened?
Well, and then you couple on like a very busy schedule, which most people are in their 40s, 50s, and early 60s.
Yeah.
And that's when the weight gain and the body comp changes start, because now their non-purposeful exercise, not their training, but their non-purposeful exercise significantly decreases while their metabolism is affected. So it's a perfect storm situation.
I wish I would have had a pedometer when I was in college, right? Like just put the pedometer on, walking all over LSU's campus, riding bikes to classes, and then go to the gym. And I'm like, then play basketball for 3 hours
exactly.
And go, wow.
Yeah.
Now it's like, I sit behind a desk and this sucks.
exactly.
Then, so anyway, all right, let's dive into endurance athletes. I know this is an area that you're an endurance athlete. You've always really, you've written books about how to fuel them. They have unique energy demands, right? And what are your top recommendations to fuel during long training sessions and races?
Yeah, this will generalize because there are so many different endurance sports, obviously, right? In not separating genders or even distances, right? So I get that, right? But really looking at kind of what I said before, nutrition periodization is key, right? Understand your training cycles. If you don't know what those are, talk to your coaches or your coaching staff or whatever to understand how they're progressing your volume and your intensity. It should be pretty obvious because you're either going to be really hungry or not that hungry, right? A lot of adult athletes have that hunger response turned off for some reason. They don't turn off on purpose. It just, kind of happens biologically or from a sociological perspective, but understanding that first. The second thing is when you're doing, okay, let me back up. A lot of endurance athletes will jump into the question, well, what do I eat during training? Well, that's a very valid question, but you actually first need to do work in your daily nutrition first, because your daily nutrition predisposes how efficient or inefficient you will be during your training. So you could say, hey, I'm Tavis, I'm going to go out for a 4-hour bike ride. What do I eat? I would say, well, Tavis, let's look at your daily nutrition, because maybe you don't need to eat as much, or maybe you need to eat more based on your daily nutrition. So I would say if you could spend a good 80% of your time really honing in on your daily nutrition to support optimal blood sugar control, which we didn't actually state with the whole metabolic efficiency training concept, but the beauty of the body, and especially with metabolic efficiency training, is via nutrition, you can teach your body two different things. If we're talking about macronutrients and energy, you can teach it to burn more carbs and thus store more fat, or you can teach it to burn more fat and store more carbohydrates. So I've worked with both types of endurance athletes. I would say most of them actually want to burn more fat, and store more carbohydrates because that's more efficient for endurance athletes, right? Maybe not the team sport athlete, more anaerobic based athlete, but for endurance, if you're going longer, you want to burn more of your fat energy or fat calories as energy, and you want to preserve your glycogen or your carbohydrate stores as much as possible because that is what limits endurance athletes. That's what low glycogen or low carbohydrate stores introduces the infamous bonk. And endurance athletes know that way too much.
Well, maybe this next question, you mentioned blood sugar and not really getting a chance to talk a lot about that, but this next question may help with that. And it's carbohydrate periodization, right? It's a hot topic. How do you guide athletes in regards to adjusting carb intake to improve performance and metabolic efficiency?
Yeah. So I kind of come back to my ratios and I kind of mentioned my hand before. So, and I've done a lot of research on this to make it simple. There are a lot of numbers behind this, but I won't throw those out. But basically, I've come up and I've kind of redeveloped for the athletic population what I call the carbohydrate to protein ratios, right? So there are different ratios of carbohydrate to protein when you consume them for breakfast, lunch, dinner, for snacks, whatever. If you consume carbs and protein at different ratios, it will affect blood sugar differently. So here's an example. If you consume equal parts of carbohydrate to protein, then you will optimize blood sugar like crazy, which leads to a host of benefits: energy management, better fat burning, better carbohydrate storage, better cognitive functioning. Blood sugar is linked to so many longevity concepts, better sleep habits. I mean, the list goes on and on, right? But that 1-to-1 ratio is actually a good place to start unless you're actively in a training cycle, because usually when you follow a 1-to-1 carb to protein ratio, you are so full throughout the day because, again, you're stabilizing and optimizing blood sugar like crazy. You're not going to be that hungry. So there's actually risk for being in a low energy availability state. So I don't recommend endurance athletes do that during a heavy training phase, or if they do, working with a qualified sport dietitian to help guide them when to do that. More so, I guide them into these next two ratios. So 2 parts carbohydrate to 1 part protein. And when I say parts, I actually use the hands. The hands just make total sense for most people. So 2 hands of carbs to 1 hand of protein, or 3 hands of carbs to 1 hand of protein. Those 2 are the sweet spot. That will get most of your training year, except for off season and early base training. That will supply you enough energy, enough carbohydrate. It still stabilizes and optimizes blood sugar very, very well. So those are the go-to ones. The last ratio, if you look at this as a bell-shaped curve, right? The 2-to-1 and the 3-to-1 are the middle of the bell-shaped curve. That's where most endurance athletes should stay. But on the outliers are the 1-to-1 and then the second one 4-to-1. So 4-to-1 was traditionally used probably 20 years ago now. There were a lot of products that were out kind of the 4-to-1. And listen, I'm not going to poo-poo that, right? That's 4 hands of carbs to 1 hand of protein. There's a time and a place for that for sure. Not that often, but if an endurance athlete is like, hey, I'm doing 2 or 3 sessions a day and I need to try to recoup as much carbohydrates as possible, then yeah, maybe you're consuming a lot of carbohydrates after the first or second session because you have 2 or 3 a day. But this is where the periodization comes into play, right? Most age group endurance athletes, they're training once a day, right? So they don't really need to have that rush of carbohydrates coming in, whereas that 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 ratio is perfectly fine for them.
Love it. Yeah, I love the examples too, because that now people can say, all right, during the training, 2 fists of pasta, rice, 1 fist of maybe fish, protein, etc. Makes it really
exactly
simple and easy.
Exactly.
You've worked with a lot of Olympic athletes, or you've worked with the U.S. Olympic Committee, also professional teams like the hockey team, the Vegas Golden Knights, right? What are some of the key takeaways working with the elite athletes? We've talked about endurance.
Oh my
What
gosh.
about these elite athletes? Anything?
Yeah. With a lot of the elites I've worked with, and some of them I've been blessed to work with at very young ages. So I've kind of started with the foundation, but like with teams and athletes too, it depends on the age, of course, and when the guys or girls kind of come into the team and whatnot, because they might be rookies, they might be veterans. But I will say this, it's a lot more looking at like turning over the rocks, looking for any performance advantage we can get. So I take nutrition periodization to the next level with elite athletes. Like, it is really looking at what I call microcycle periodization. So I do every single day periodization from a nutrition standpoint, based on training, based on travel, based on blood work markers. So that it's kind of like nutrition, periodization to the nth degree, the 100th level, right? The other thing, obviously, the elephant in the room, supplements. Supplements become so much more, I'm not going to say important. I'm going to say much more on the radar with professional athletes because they are so rampant in every single sport. So a lot of my job is to actually provide that education, and not only the safe and the legal and the tested, but also the efficacy of, do we even need to spend our resources even looking at this supplement? Like, what is the bang for the buck? What is the research? Will it actually do what it needs to do? And if we answer yes to all those, what is the actual dosage? Because here's where a lot of pro athletes and elite athletes don't understand, and they kind of miss the boat, is they're like, oh yeah, I'm taking omega-3s. Oh, well, great. How much are you taking? I don't know, 2 capsules. How much? Like, what's the EPA? What's the DHA? Like, so it's that's what I'm talking about. We get to the nitty gritty details with professional and elite athletes.
Excellent. Let's dive into the business side of things. I know you have several different angles of the business and other things outside of just your nutrition business, nutrition coaching. You've mentored sports dietitians. I've seen some of the things you've developed there, which is fantastic. What are some of the key skills that nutrition professionals need to have to build a successful career in this field?
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, I mean, this has changed. My answer has changed over the last 10 years or so because the field, as you know, the field is morphing like crazy right now, right? But what I'm seeing is, and this is, of course, with a little bit of bias, but nutrition professionals, sport dietitians, future ones, you need to have a really good basis and understanding of exercise physiology. I'm not saying you need a degree in it. That'd be great to understand a little bit more, but that's where I'm seeing a lot of deficiencies because remember, I'm talking about nutrition periodization, right? And remember, the whole reason I kind of created that concept is so all these health professionals could talk the same language. I'm finding a lot of our newer sport dietitians are not able to talk the same language, right? It's only nutrition, which is great. Don't get me wrong. But to be a really, really well qualified and respected sport dietitian coming up, you need to be able to speak the language of strength coaches, of medical staff, and of sport dietitians and deliver it to athletes in athlete speak, right? So that is first and foremost. I think the other thing, honestly, which not a lot of young people like to do, is you need to stand up in front of people and start talking. And it's like one of the biggest stressors in the world. I hated public speaking. I hated it. And now look at me, like I can't shut up, right? But that said, I just see a lot of younger individuals, they haven't built that self-confidence yet. So the more opportunity you can get to stand in front of groups, teams, your colleagues, your peers, professors, whomever, use those opportunities. I mean, don't shy away from those because they are so important to develop your career.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but when I did my undergrad, I was the only male in the senior class, or at least my graduating class. And it was, congratulations, girls in Tavis. It was so funny. But I joined the Student Dietetic Association, and getting up to have to say something as one of a sync treasurer, I was just shaking, going, this is awful. How am I going to? And then eventually, like you said, you just overcome it. You just have to do it because it's a really game changer.
Yeah. I will say one more thing, if I can add one more thing. I see how young dietitians are being taught still in university, and nothing aside from that, but saying, when you're a young practicing sport dietitian or soon to be a sport RD, make sure you understand that you are going to have to develop your system. So not only your philosophy, right, which will change throughout your career, I guarantee it, but if you can develop a system in how you actually deliver nutrition education, your life and your career will be much easier. And I say this tongue in cheek because I went through this process early in my career, and I'm sure you did too. It was just I felt like I was just answering all these questions, question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. But I wasn't able to deliver a nutrition message to that. I was just answering questions. So if you develop a system in kind of a progression in how you're going to teach, not only does it favor good behavior change, also, which you should put in the feather in your cap, is learn behavior modification strategies. It's hugely important. But developing a system in how you work around your personality, around your delivery of education is so crucial. And last but not least, you mentioned it a little bit, but get a mentor, or more importantly, mentors, not only in sport nutrition, but also in business. If you're thinking about running your own business, look at people who have been there, done that, and maybe are a few years ahead of you, because you want to learn from a lot of their mistakes also.
Yep. Now, going back to your metabolic efficiency, nutrition periodization, and sports dietitians? What advice would you give to them that's looking to expand their knowledge in that area? I know you have some books around that, but how would you help them kind of understand that better? Certification.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of free resources. I mean, books aren't free, but they're fairly cheap. YouTube is fantastic. I've done so many presentations and webinars on this, and speaking at different conferences about this. So maybe search that first for sure. I will tell you this: if you're not knowledgeable in nutrition periodization, you will get left behind in the sport nutrition world. Absolutely, hands down. If you're not knowledgeable in metabolic efficiency training, you're not going to get left behind, but you're not going to have that upper hand, right? So if you understand more about that regulation of blood sugar, but where to go, free resources, books. Obviously I have, I call it it's the Metabolic Efficiency Training Specialist certification, where it's only for health professionals. You have to apply, you have to actually be accepted. That could be like that next level kind of a thing. That's almost like university education level. But honestly, I would just say this too, like back to the mentors, like how important are mentors in our lives? Like I've had like handfuls of mentors in my life. I would really look at that first, but that you look at someone who actually knows about the things that you don't know about, i.e. nutrition periodization and metabolic efficiency training.
Yeah, I love that. Go to that area you love the most and you want to really hone your skills around, and just talk to those people that have specialized in published research like yourself. All right, rapid fire round. These are going to be some pretty quick things, like one answer, couple of answers.
Perfect.
So before we wrap up, let's do this little quick thing. About 5 questions. Go-to meal before a long endurance workout. What do you love? Like, what's your go-to meal?
A smoothie that I concoct from many different ingredients. But
I guess you
know this, it has adequate protein and good amount of carbohydrates and fat. So it's very well balanced. But smoothie for me sits well in my GI tract.
There you go. Favorite recovery food?
Oh boy, that kind of depends. It depends on the session, right?
Or maybe
usually
a couple of favorite recovery
usually I'll gravitate towards something like, I know this sounds weird, but I love chips and guac, and I'll throw some protein in there. Like, again, sounding weird, but I love sardines and I love tuna fish. So those are super, super easy.
It's an interesting guac and tuna fish. That's it. But again, you can use that. I love these little salmon, like these wild caught salmon packs. And you can use like avocado instead of mayo in there. So
exactly. Yeah.
Most underrated nutrition strategy for athletes.
Metabolic efficiency training, for sure.
One supplement you actually recommend.
Ooh, I actually recommend a few, and I'm not just saying this, Tavis.
I know where you're going.
You do fish oil supplements.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there's so many really like versatile ones. You can't like
there are.
You could probably say vitamin D or whatever else, but biggest myth about endurance sports nutrition.
This is great. Thank you for asking this. That carbohydrates are necessary in copious amounts all the time. Huge myth.
Awesome. No, I love those. All right. Last couple of questions. Let's learn a little bit more about just a couple of things. If there's one key takeaway that you'd like our audience to remember about nutrition periodization or metabolic efficiency, what would that be?
Yeah. Simplify it as much as possible. Carbs, protein, fat. Combine them 90% of the time in, get close to some of the ratios I talked about. That is literally as simple as you can make it for athletes and for yourself. But it does, like, sport nutrition does not need to be complex. Listen, research is complex. Delivering the research into real life is complex, but we need to make it as simple as possible for athletes.
And Bob said, put sardines in your smoothie.
Sardine? I don't know about that one. Although now I'm going to try to come up with a recipe on that.
I just gave you a terrible idea. Last question, we want people to connect with you. So where can they connect with you, learn more, check out your books, your courses, everything you do? Is there a place they can go?
Yeah, easiest place is to go on my website, Energy Performance. It's ENRGperformance.com. You can find out everything that I'm doing and that I've done.
I wonder how many people that are watching are going to type in the word energy. So remember, ENRGperformance.com. I did that like the first when you change it from something else. I forgot what it was.
I did.
And I'm like, why do I keep getting the mailer demon back that says he's not? I'm like, I'm typing in the word energy.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a little play on words, but it's kind of unique. I mean, you can just Google my name too. I'm everywhere, but yeah, the website is easy.
Yeah. And Bob, we didn't discuss this. He's got this great food product. Was it Birota Foods, BIROTA?
Well, All Around Snack Company.
All Around Snack Company. I keep getting that message.
Yeah.
He's got some great food products. So that'll probably connect you with there. So be sure to check that out. Bob, Thank you so much. As always, it's always fun to chat, catch up, see how things are going. And you just have an amazing wealth of resources for those in this field. So thank you so much for being a mentor to so many and helping people grow their practice and career.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
That's it for today's episode of the Winner's Circle and the Eat to Win podcast show. A big thank you to Bob Seebohar for sharing his wealth of knowledge on nutrition periodization, metabolic efficiency, and fueling for different athlete populations. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to like, subscribe, and share with your community. Until next time, keep winning.
Thanks for joining us on the Eat to Win show. Remember, every meal is a step toward victory. Until next time, stay strong and keep winning.